already met me, my name is Elizabeth Kim. I'm the president of National Lawyers Guild, Sacramento Chapter. And if you don't know what a National Lawyers Guild does, we're here to protect your First Amendment rights. So if you ever want to protest, lead a march, hold a rally, say fuck ICE, fuck the police, fuck Trump, however you want to express yourselves, we want to make sure that you're not a victim of police brutality. So that's what we're here for. Additionally, from all issues, as we know, in our social justice fights, there's a lot of things that you need representation with. If you ever need pro bono free legal services, please visit our website, nationallawyersguild.org. All right? So I wanted to bring up Christina. She's the co-founder of immigrantsforfreedom.org. That's where most of our, actually all proceeds of this money is going to this organization, and she'll speak more about it to you today.
Hey everybody, my name is Christina Mansfield. I'm the co-founder and co-executive director at freedomforimmigrants.org. So thank you so much to NLG and to all the performers tonight. So we've been running a program at the West County Detention Facility in Richmond since about 2010, visiting and supporting people in immigration detention, raising money to get them free from detention, basically advocating that we don't detain anyone and that we abolish ICE detention. As some of you know, recently the West County contract ended in a really unethical way, in a really bad way, where folks who are detained at that facility are kind of in limbo. And there wasn't enough time for us to really organize, so all of the proceeds from tonight are going towards winning people their freedom in Richmond so that they're not separated from their families. So 100%. So I just wanted to say a couple things about bond in general. So I don't know if everyone here knows what immigration bond is, or I'm assuming most people know what immigration detention is, right? But basically this detention system did not exist 30 years ago. We did not detain people 30 years ago, period. And in the 1980s, there was the rise of two private prison corporations, Correction Corporation of America, who recently renamed themselves CoreCivic, and the Geo Group. These two companies, these private corporations, rose in the 80s, and they created this entire industry, and they helped to spin a story about how it's necessary, just like mass incarceration, right? It's really necessary for us to do that. So, immigration bond is an amount of money that thousands of people across the country who are detained, they have a monetary amount that if they pay that amount, they could be free, and if they can't pay that amount, they're not free, and they can't get out of detention for years and years. So I just want to say, like, very quick things about this. So, you know, I just said that immigration detention is relatively new, right? It didn't happen over the 1980s. But the history of this racist bondage bullshit is a history that is, you know, just so long in the history of this country. And bond itself, this idea, so bond is an amount of money that you pay the government, and basically that money is saying, like, this person is going to come back and they're going to complete their court proceedings and they're not going to become a public charge. So the whole detention system rests on this assumption that people, A, aren't going to show up to court, and B, they're going to become a public charge, and they're going to feed off of our resources and not contribute enough, blah, blah, blah. So that's what this whole bond system, those are some of the assumptions that it's resting upon. So we know that those assumptions are false, and we know that when people are given immigration bonds, that they get out of detention, they're reunited with their families, they're supporting their families, and they want more than anything to be here. And so we have a unique opportunity now. Like, we have our hands tied behind our back in this administration, but bond is one of the few things that we have left, very concrete. We pay the money, people are released, and then we provide case management services and support for those people and make sure that they have everything that they need to be successful in their immigration cases. And through this whole bond fund, we can prove that immigration detention is entirely unnecessary. We can We've been doing a lot of bond work in this administration. We've raised over $100,000 this year to get people out. So that's what we're doing here tonight. Thank you guys so much, and cheers. We'll keep you posted.
Enough money raised to get the detainees out, because as she said, it's the only way that we can help them out at this point. For the past several months, we've tried to raise money in many different ways. It's very difficult to even find where the detainees have been transferred. It's not even up to the sheriff's department anymore. ICE has complete discretion and choice on timing, where they get sent off, and there's no justification whatsoever. So the families are going crazy, literally not knowing where their family, their loved ones are being transported to. Not to mention they're not even given legal representation, due process. So it's a very sad immigration crisis truly in our country right now. So you being here means everything to the status of immigration, and it's only natural that we invited Immortal Technique to come and be a part of this event. And today I wanted to present to him a very special award, the Social Justice Award. And we wanted to recognize you, Mr. Cornell, for championing racial equality and protection of human rights through your art and your outreach through the community ever since we've ever known you. Thank you very much. So now needs no introduction. Immortal Technique.
All right. First and foremost, ladies and gentlemen, I know most of you know me as Immortal Technique, but my real name is Felipe Andres Coronel Moreno. I wanted to start out with the subject of immigration and the separation of children and how that's not a laughing matter at all. But I want to share a joke that a young person sent me about immigration online. They said to me, a banker, a worker, and an immigrant are sitting at a table. There are 20 cookies on the table. The banker steals 19 cookies, and then he tells the worker, look out, the immigrant is going to steal your cookie. And I thought about this joke for a long time, because I thought about the jobs that people say that we steal, and how many of them simply have been lost to machinery. I thought about the jobs they never complain about us stealing. Like, I've never seen rallies in front of a baseball stadium, right? Like, how dare you take away these jobs and give them these Dominicans and Cubans? By the way, we're winning, so I guess maybe that's why people don't care. But we do live in an era, and we have to admit to ourselves that we live in an era where it's become popular to not care about the moral fiber of the people that represent you as long as they win. So it doesn't matter if the person is a sexual predator, or a rapist, or a liar, or a cheat. As long as he can get who we want into the Supreme Court, that's how government thinks about people who are in politics. Can they work for us? Can they win for us? And it also has an extreme effect upon the revolutionary community, because we realize that we're playing by different rules. We care if somebody's a rapist. We care if somebody's a child molester. We care if somebody's a thief or a murderer, if they're representing our causa and they're representing our people. But they don't give a fuck if that person is a morally bankrupt individual, as long as they carry out the agenda that they want. And when I say agenda, I think that people need to understand what that means. Hitler was not a person that had blue eyes and blonde hair. He was a person that had brown eyes and brown hair. But what was the agenda? Aryanism. What was he pushing? And the people accepted him for that. In the same way that there are many people who think now, because they're quote-unquote Latino, that they're light-skinned, that they can fit in somehow, that they can wave that little Trump flag, and somehow they won't be the ones that eventually get rounded up and deported. And realistically, their ideology was a failure, because they came after you too. And many of us look at that and we think, oh, you know what? I want to laugh at those people, and that's my first instinct too. But instead I feel sorry for them. And I tell everybody, you know what? Pity those people. Because to me, they're like those native Apaches, right? Who ended up on the same train as everybody else, shipped off their land and sent to some reservation. And they thought because they were some hang around the fort, because they served their country so well, that they would be spared this deportation to an open-air prison where there are only 2 tests for the water on those reservations. Now, in New York, where I live, there are 8 tests for water in order to make it feasibly drinkable for people and children. But on a reservation, there's still only 2 tests for water. And many of those reservations have less drinkable water about at the level of Flint, Michigan. Now, why am I bringing this up? Why talk about Native American reservations? Well, because I feel like the word Latino is a misused word. I feel like it only represents Latino, Latinx, whatever you want to fucking call yourself. Do you know why? Because we're talking about a Latinized culture, right? And what does that mean? That means that the people who call themselves Native Americans, who live on a reservation or walk around here, are Anglicanized natives, right? They speak in English. And me, people from Guatemala, from Mexico, from El Salvador, from Colombia, from Peru, we're Latinized indigenous people, right? We have our indigenous culture. You listen to our music, it sounds very different. You look at our pre-Columbian civilizations, we all believed that the earth didn't belong to us, but that we belong to the earth, right? We have very similar customs when it comes to the elevation of our women and the realization of our culture. And yet we are now divided solely by these languages, so that we can't see them as extensions of ourselves, so that we don't realize that these migration routes that indigenous people had predated any Europeans that came here. And without having that honest discussion with ourselves, we can't have an honest discussion about immigration, revolution, or how to move forward. I wanted to make this conversation a little bit more personal, because I could sit here and spew facts to you all day long, and I could act like a human teleprompter, and there were people who would be pleased with that. But without me making a personal story, I think that the communication and the conversation is only half served. And I want to tell you, I'm sorry, my mother wanted me to be a lawyer, but it never really worked out for me. But what's interesting is that I became a teacher in prison, and I learned something there. If you're only teaching people by your successes, whether you're a lawyer, a doctor, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a professional, or whether you're a person who just works a regular job of any sort that you could be proud of, or that you are dedicated to, if you're only teaching people from your successes, you're not teaching these young people anything. You're just bragging to them. You cannot teach people from your successes. Where is the teaching from the failures? Where do you tell your students, no, this is what happened to me when my heart was broken and I felt suicidal, when I lost my job and I was on the outs, when I thought I was going to be with this person for the rest of my life and then it fell apart like a house of cards, when I had everything figured out and then I ended up in prison, when I poured my heart out to the person that I thought would be there for the rest of my life and then they left me with my dick in my hand, standing in the middle of the street, broke as a motherfucking joke. Pardon my language. But isn't that more honest than, I went to college, I studied, and if you work really hard, you too can be a success. Children don't hear you say, don't smoke weed. They see you rolling it. So if you tell them don't smoke while you're rolling it, they see you rolling it. They don't care what you said. The conversation with our youth needs to be about us being a living example to them, a fearless living example. And in order to be a fearless living example, I have to talk about the things that I don't necessarily talk about.